My name is Rosanna Leal, and I'm the founder and director of the Refugee Buddy Project. This is a project that I set up a few years ago, and it was initially to connect local people with newly arriving refugees coming to the Hastings area. I have a refugee background myself. I arrived in the UK when I was 9 years old with my family from Chile, the time we were escaping the dictatorship, the fascist dictatorship of Pinochet. And we arrived and were given a home, and we were adopted by the National Union of Scottish Mine Workers in Fife, in the Kingdom of Fife. And we were welcomed by a community, by a mining community who made sure that we were looked after. They kitted out a house for us and wouldn't leave us alone for literally the first year that we were there. So I wanted to replicate that welcome that my family had received when we first arrived. I wanted to replicate that because I felt that as a child, my experience of that had been very grounding and had made me feel very safe. So I was initially really worried about starting the project because I didn't really, that there was so much anti-refugee feeling in the mainstream media that I thought I may end up with egg on my face and no one will join and it will be horrible. But actually I did some ads and I spoke to lots of people in Hastings who just said, yes, let's do it. And we now have over 200 volunteers in our books. We were initially set up to welcome the refugees who were coming through the Vulnerable People's Resettlement Programme. Hastings has a commitment to taking 100 people under the Vulnerable People's Resettlement Programme. Rother Wealden has a commitment to take 40 people under that. So that translates into about 26 families and some single people also who've arrived. But as we began our work, we have now expanded and we actually buddy all people seeking refuge, because Hastings is also a dispersal area. It's part of the Home Office dispersal area, which means there are people living here in this area who could be very isolated. And so we have started to buddy a lot of those people, giving food, all sorts of kind of support and genuinely and really just offering friendship. With our work, we were really lucky because we managed to secure a space called Open on the seafront. This was just before the pandemic started, and this was becoming a lovely social space. People could come have tea, coffee, Syrian pastries, and we were running workshops. We were doing pop-up suppers, Syrian suppers, and we had planned a whole load of activities for this year. But with lockdown, we had to cancel everything and we actually had to leave the space as well. And so as we went into lockdown, everyone was really scared. And I don't know if you can remember what the feeling was at the time. Nobody knew what was going to happen. We all thought we were going to die and, that we were all going to get it. And it felt really urgent to maintain communication, especially with the refugee families, because my biggest fear was that actually when there are crises in the world, it's the most vulnerable people that are left behind. And they're often left behind because they become invisible. Because nobody really knows they're there, or they don't want to know they're there because it becomes more complicated to help them. And so we decided that we'd left the space, we had nowhere to meet, so we decided that we were going to go online, and the whole project went online literally in that week. We had 2 sessions per week, one with a translator for the refugee families, and one for the bigger community that didn't need a translator. But people could come to both as well. We'd already been talking to the facilitators, and the facilitators had been chosen on the basis of their approach to working with communities. So, Jimena and Janie have a background of working with textile fabrics and textiles in general with communities. And so I felt it was really important to have people who shared an approach to working with communities.
Rosanna invited myself and Janie to be involved in a project that was engaging with the refugees that were a part of the Buddy Project. And the initial idea was to meet, make together, tell stories, and work towards a patchwork that we could either, take and show at the Delaware. And then when lockdown happened, we realised that, we had to adapt it and change it. So we had several meetings with Janie, Rosanna, and we came up with the name Stitch for Change, Pandemic Patchwork. And, through a lot of work between the three of us, we sort of coordinated workshops, and there's a lot of behind the scenes coordination as well, and lots of other people involved at those stages as well.
Yeah, I think we felt really strongly when the pandemic hit that we wanted to keep going, and so I think the Refugee Buddy Project is all about creating and providing a safe space and helping to hold people in times of need. So it just felt natural that the pandemic was a big time of need, and that we would do that with this project. So yeah, rather than just scrapping everything, we thought, no, we'll go ahead and we'll just adapt. And that's what we did.
So I'm Jane Grimshaw, and in the project I delivered a few of the online sessions, generally about how you actually make quilts. And so I gave a demonstration on traditional paper piecing for quilts making. And then after the project's been finished, and also I made pieces for it as well, but once it's finished, all the pieces have come to me. So I've been kind of living with them for a while, and then it's up to me to kind of put them together and make them into the 4 quilts that we're going to be seeing in the exhibition. There's so many layers to the stories in some of them. It's fascinating and kind of, it's exciting, and it's almost like it's very intimate actually, working with somebody else's work and thinking about their thought processes while you're working on it yourself. And it's a really, I find it quite a responsibility that you've got to, you've got to be able to try and represent what they've done in the best way, and to show, to each of the pieces will talk to you and say, I want to be here, I want to be there. And on each quilt, there's kind of one key piece, which on this one is the love in the time of Corona, which just was a standout piece. And you think that's the central piece of it. And we work everything out from that. And each 4 quilts have got their own voice, and they're all very different. But each piece will tell you almost which quilt it wants to be on.
So one of the interests that Rosanna had was in the arbilleras from Chile, and I just wanted to explain a little bit about the arbilleras. So during the 70s in Chile, after the dictatorship, one of the manifestations of culture that happened was the making of arbilleras, and arbilleras it's like a burlap, so very much like this fabric here that you see on this piece, or Hessian, and women would stitch visual examples, visual stories of what was happening in Chile. So they were stitching the repression, they were stitching the poverty, and they became living testimonies of things that happened during the dictatorship. It became illegal to make arbilleras. So arbilleras in themselves at one point were actually very subversive pieces of artwork, of protest artwork. So I've actually got an example here of an arbillera. This is it's a modern arbillera, but just so that you have a sense of the size of the arbilleras. So they were never really bigger than this. And usually they would be stitched onto maybe a rice sack or potato sack, and lots of the fabrics would have been recycled. That was one of the things that we tried to take over into the project Stitch for Change. So we used the element as much as possible to use recycled and found fabrics. With the families of the disappeared, it would be common to use clothing from the disappeared person in the Arbiyeda pieces. So the Arbiyeda itself becomes a multi-layered story of what was happening, and in its kind of delivery of that story, it had other layers as well, because you had women literally stitching their pain onto fabric.
So there are going to be 4 completed quilts with around 30 patches on each quilt, 20 to 30. We had around 90 finished patches, I think, and so some people created masks as well that got attached to the quilts. So we had about 75 people take part. Some of those were from Hastings College. Some of them were directly connected to the Refugee Buddy Project.
These are the people who make history. The pandemic must be told. The experience of the pandemic needs to be told from the point of view of the people who experienced it, not the people who managed it.